Welcome into another edition of the Hang Time Podcast. Sekou Smith here in Atlanta. My main man, John Schumann, is in New Jersey. John Hartzell behind the glass, pushing these buttons, making it all happen. Later in the show, we will be joined by our colleague and friend, Shaun Powell of NBA.com. He's in L.A., has been all season, and is documenting the wild and crazy times of the Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron James, and all of that traveling circus, as well as the Clippers. We'll get into that with him later in the show. But first, Shu, Wednesday nights, strange. We've had some unbelievable, wild, and crazy Wednesday nights, and then we have crunchier Wednesday nights, the nights when the games aren't quite as good. There was 8 of them last night. Not the compelling, dramatic finishes that we had as recently as last week, but interesting. Very interesting thing, Shu. What stood out to you watching Wednesday night slate of games this week?
The one thing that stood out to me is the Pacers losing in Washington by 18. This is a team that withstood the first Victor Oladipo absence pretty well. I think there was something like 7-4, 8-4 or something without him in his first absence, depending on whether you count the game he was injured in. But now in 3 games without him, or since he was lost for the season, the results have not been nearly as good. Their first game, they lost in Memphis only by 3, but the Grizzlies have been pretty terrible over the last month. And then they got thumped at home by the Warriors, lost by 32, and then losing at Washington by 18 last night. It's not a good sign for the sort of Pacers without Oladipo. I thought they could hold on pretty well just because they have, 3-4 guys that if you're picking all-star reserves, you'd put 3 or 4 of those names on a list just as a preliminary list. A Bogdanovich, who's having a terrific season, Miles Turner, Domantas Sabonis, even Thaddeus Young a little bit, and who's having another great season. So things have not held up so far in those first 3 games, and I think it's a concern for that team is just as far as, how much they can hold on. Their offense has been pretty terrible, especially in the last 2. They scored less than a point per possession in both of the last 2 games, the Warriors game and the Washington game. And Washington has not been a good defensive team, so that's a problem. So it's interesting, to see. I don't know how far they can fall. I don't think they can fall much further than 5th in the East. But, if they're just not as competitive, that makes the East playoff field just that much shallower.
I kind of throw out the Warriors game, Shu. The way the Warriors are playing right now, they beat the brakes off anybody. Victor Oladipo or not. They could have ran the Pacers off the floor. But you're right. It does make you wonder, what's the net for this Pacers team now? Where do they fall? How far do they fall without Oladipo in the mix? And who fills the void? I mean, they don't have another guy on the roster. I know some people look at Tyreke Evans and think, oh, well, Tyreke Evans can play a bigger role. He's
not been great.
Yeah, he's been a number 1 guy or a quasi number 1 guy earlier in his career. He could be the, kind of the player that fills that role. And I just don't know. I think people are underselling just how dynamic Oladipo had been since coming to Indiana and joining the Pacers. I mean, he had become one of the electrifying, wing players in the league, really.
Yeah, I mean, their formula now is to win ugly. They play slow. They have a top 5 defense. They can sort of take the grit and grind mantle, perhaps, at this point, with the slow pace and the defense being much better than the offense.
Sure. I'm not sure that's anything to aspire to, since the grit and grind is grinding away in Memphis. And that Memphis team was in action last night as well. Pretty good finish, obviously, for the Timberwolves. Karl Anthony Towns with a baseline jumper to beat the buzzer and give Ryan Saunders another win. What's been your impression quickly of the Timberwolves and how they fared here recently? Hanging
on. I mean, they're still without Covington, he's been gone for a long time, and that's a critical element. And then they've basically been playing without 2 or 3 point guards for the last week or so. Rose has been hurt. Teague has been hurt. Tyus Jones has been hurt. Jared Bayless was taking big shots for them. Jared Bayless, who barely had played in the last year.
Yeah, he ran out of gas late. It was pretty funny. We were making fun of him on Game Time last night.
But they're holding on. I mean, they're a game under 500. They're 3 games in the loss column behind the Clippers, who are in 8th place. But the one thing about that is that between them and the Clippers is the Lakers, who I assume are going to get LeBron James back at some point.
At some point. Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's still very much an uphill battle, but if they can get healthy, then they can be. I mean, we've seen them at full strength put a little bit of a run together, but right now they're just holding on, and obviously, they can take every win they can get. So that's obviously a huge shot for Towns, just in the sort of grander scale of the whole season.
Yeah, well, still a lot to be determined at this stage of the season. A week ahead of the trade deadline, even further out, a couple weeks out of All-Star Weekend. I don't know that anybody that's in that mix where the Timberwolves are in the West, and certainly teams outside the playoff line in the East right now, still have a shot to put together the kind of runs that would get them back into contention. So could be interesting. You mentioned the Lakers, and I did bring up the fact that we have found a way to get on to Shaun Powell's busy schedule. So got a lot of questions for Shaun that we need to get in here, Shu. So definitely looking forward to talking to him. Shaun Powell, NBA.com's very own, joining us here on the Hang Time Podcast. Shaun, how you doing, man? Good to hear your voice. Saw you last week on NBA TV, but man, you have jumped into it, living and working in LA, dealing with the Lakers and LeBron James and all that drama. How's it been? Has it been what you thought so far?
Yeah, I would say so. When LeBron goes anywhere, you don't expect quiet, you don't expect calm, you don't expect routine. So, but you do tend to expect the unexpected. And I think if there's any way we can sum up, his tenure here so far, I think that would be it. Once you mix in, number one, how well he's played. I mean, give him credit. I mean, at this stage in his career, before he got hurt, he was on MVP level. The number two, the way the Lakers have been hot and cold during his tenure here. Then his injury, then the injuries of a couple others. And then the Lakers right now are out of the playoffs. And then when you mix in the Anthony Davis drama and the fact that LeBron is still sitting out, well, as I said, expect the unexpected.
Is there any chance that he shows up in uniform for Saturday's game against the Warriors, 8:30 on ABC, excuse me? Is there an opportunity at all for him to make his return? Then it keeps moving back, Shaun. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't want to start anything that hasn't already been started, of course. But this seems very strange to me that a guy who's never missed this kind of time in his career would miss it now. And maybe it's got to do with the injury, the nature of the injury, or his years of service and how much time he has spent, grinding away in this league. But this is a long time for a guy who's never missed this kind of time to be out of the mix.
Well, Sekou, if you go back to Christmas Day, where LeBron said he felt a pop, right there and then you felt, well, maybe this is something for the first time in his career. And then, he had some media friends, and he told his media friends that it's probably not that serious. It's going to probably be okay. So then you felt that, well, maybe this would probably be like a week or two. But now Steph Curry had the same injury. We don't know the severity, of course, of two different players and everything like that. He missed 11 games. I didn't think he was going to come back right away. But now I'm on the other end. I didn't think he was going to be out this long. He has come back to practice, been kind of limited, although he had some contact the other day. From a dramatic standpoint, yeah, coming back against the Warriors, the same place in Oakland, yeah, that would get the best hit. And it would also probably take a little bit of attention away from the Anthony Davis drama. So if you're looking at it from the dramatic angle, yeah, coming back against the Warriors would make sense. But yeah, I am kind of curious about this. We can never underestimate muscle pulls, hamstrings, things like that, because it's very unpredictable, particularly in a player who's 34 years old and has a lot of mileage on his body. But yeah, if you want to buy the conspiracy theory, and feel free to do so, all kind of things swirl through your head. Is there something else going on? How is this linked or related to Anthony Davis? How is this linked or related to the way the Lakers have played since his absence? A lot of things go into your head, but without any kind of factual proof, of course, we have to play it straight down the middle.
Shaun, I wonder with this Davis thing and the timing of it being seemingly to force the Pelicans' hands into trading him to LA, or giving LA an advantage in that Boston can't enter the bidding at this point. If it's a sign that the Lakers, or LeBron at least, wants to make a push right now this season, rather than using this first year in LA as just sort of a feeling out period and thinking that, okay, it's in year two that we really start to make a push to compete with the Warriors. when he first got there and with the signings that they made, okay, this is just a 1 year holding period until they can, really go for the free agents and or Davis in the summer. But now maybe I feel like there's maybe some urgency. Maybe the injury is a sign that, hey, LeBron, your time in this league is limited. Like the first sign of, hey, you're mortal. And maybe there's a little bit more urgency than maybe we thought there was when he first came there with a 4-year deal.
Well, I kind of compared it the other day from driving in the middle lane to all of a sudden going over into the express lane. When LeBron came in, you're right. Matter of fact, the very first press conference, he says, hey, we can't beat the Warriors. We're not going to compete against the Warriors. I know what I'm getting myself into here. Kind of compared it to when he first went to Cleveland, a lot of young players. I'm here. Initially, I'm going to teach. I'm going to do all this and that. But what he couldn't say then is, I'm going to stay healthy. Yes, the timing is very curious, and I believe we can connect the dots there, again, without any kind of proof, but it's just, we're sitting here just talking, that maybe LeBron got a sense of his own mortality with this injury. And then I don't necessarily think it's him overcoming this injury, but maybe him may not overcome the next injury if it's lurking around the corner. And so maybe that sense of urgency hit LeBron, and then all of a sudden it hit Magic Johnson. And suddenly the timeline has been sped up. Now, whether or not the New Orleans Pelicans will cooperate with this line of thinking, that's the big question mark. I think when LeBron's people agency made the demand, request, which way you want to phrase it, I think it caused within the New Orleans Pelicans a sense of defiance, as though, well, why am I going to cooperate with you? Why are we going to help you? If anything, we would probably help someone else if the return is equal or greater. And I think the Pelicans have sort of dug in their heels here. I don't think there's been much communications, if any communication, between the two parties. And you saw the carefully worded press release, and that they're not going to let outside influences dictate when or if they're going to trade Anthony Davis. And I thought that was a direct message to only one team in the NBA, and that was the Lakers. And that was also LeBron's agency. So we will see what happens here over the next 8 days. But the betting money is they're not going to do anything with Anthony Davis between now and the trade deadline.
I think the fascinating scenario is if they trade him somewhere else. Do the Lakers wait that next year? Like, he may say, I'm only going to sign with the Lakers in 2020. Okay, but are the Lakers going to wait it out and sign a bunch of 1-year contracts with other guys? Or are they going to say, all right, well, if he's somewhere else, say he's in Boston or he's in New York or wherever, come July, whatever, or come, September or whatever, when training camps open, are the Lakers really going to just sit out free agency this year and wait for him in 2020? Or are they going to say, we got to move on? And so that's the sort of the fascinating scenario for me, like with LeBron getting older and with LeBron, maybe feeling his own mortality at this point. How can they wait out? How can they wait him out until 2020 if he's somewhere else?
Yeah, obviously that is a big question, but I think Anthony Davis pretty much represents a plan B for the Lakers. The plan A was Paul George, and that didn't work out very well. And then the next plan is going to be Kawhi Leonard. We'll see how that may work out. And of course, the wild card in all of it is Kevin Durant, although KD is sort of on record, I think, saying that, not going to play with the Lakers, if he's going to go anywhere. He hasn't directly said that, but you can read between his lines in his recent interviews. Yeah, I think right now the Lakers probably don't anticipate Anthony Davis being sent anywhere other than LA this season. It'd be interesting if suddenly, like, say, the Toronto Raptors pushed all their chips on the table and made a play for him before the trade deadline, throwing in, Siakam and maybe some other goodies, and that the Pelicans would bite on that. And that would be the ultimate, slap in the face to the Lakers. And then what happens? Look, if Anthony Davis is not coming to the Lakers until 2020, well, LeBron James is halfway through that contract and he's 36 years old, and who knows what his body's like then. So all this is it's just really up in the air right now. And you wonder how many plans the Lakers have: Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and if they're going to hit on any of them. Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson right now, a little bit under they're on, not only are they on the clock, but they're a little bit under pressure to pull something off. I'm not so sure the threat right before the trade deadline was the smartest move, because instead of making New Orleans cooperate with them, it sort of made New Orleans defiant. So, again, we'll see how it shakes loose. And we also don't know who's really calling the shots in New Orleans. Is it ownership? Is it Gail Benson all of a sudden? Or is it still Dell Demps? So all these things are, moving as we speak.
Can the Lakers afford to miss the playoffs this season? I mean, they're 26-25 in the ninth spot, 2 games behind the Clippers, who they have a big game against tonight at 10:30 Eastern on League Pass. Is it feasible for the Lakers to miss the playoffs and kind of delay this entire process maybe until this time next season?
I think from an optics standpoint, it would be embarrassing. Because I think the playoffs were a given when LeBron James came in. Of course, things have changed. So if you look at it from a planning standpoint and a team building standpoint and a bigger picture standpoint, then maybe missing the playoffs wouldn't be all that bad, because then they would get, whatever odds they would have of moving up in the draft, but they would also give them a chance to regroup. I never think there's anything good to come out of a team like the Lakers missing the playoffs. If you're talking about the Atlanta Hawks, okay, great. But a team like the Lakers, where you have LeBron, you have some young players who need to know what it's like to play in the playoffs, I think the payoff is greater to at least go there and get bounced in the first round than to miss the playoffs and end up with the 15th pick. So look, it's all tied to LeBron. It's all tied to when he comes back, and all of a sudden there aren't that many games left in the season. And you have to look at a scenario where, given the fact that the West is really loaded, Doc Rivers said the other day that, hey, we're all playing for our lives right now, where, 10 teams are fighting for 8 spots. You had the very real scenario of LeBron James playing meaningful games in early mid-April at a time when he probably should be resting then. But because the Lakers could be in intense competition for one of those last couple spots, he's going to have to play the rest of this season, and he's going to probably have to play 30-plus minutes, very limited games off. What's that going to do to his body? And then he has to turn around and play in the postseason. So it's going to be a very interesting, not only a next week to see what happens with Anthony Davis, but the next couple months with this team, because that injury and the Davis demand has really thrown everything for a loop here.
One of their most important games is tonight. We're speaking on Thursday. They play the Clippers tonight, 8th place Clippers. Clippers won the first meeting in the wake of LeBron's injury, and then they have 2 more, one in early March, one in early April. So the urgency is right now, really.
Yes, I would think so. And let's not also discount the fact that, you're not going to have Lonzo Ball. He's not going to play. Kyle Kuzma's status is up in the air. So it's just really not LeBron James. And you've had some surprises here with a couple players on the roster. They played a little bit better than you thought. Zubac, a couple others, and Rondo's back. But how much longer can you exist on such a limited and a roster that seems to change every game, a rotation? Brandon Ingram will get his career high one night, as he did his last game, and then has a tendency to drift his next game. The consistency just really isn't there with him. And sometimes you go in and you're looking for, who's going to lead us tonight? Is it going to be Kuzma? Is it going to be Ingram? While LeBron is out. So, yeah, I would probably say for the Lakers, the season kind of starts now. I would have said that their last game, and I'm definitely going to say it their next game. But LeBron is, he's a wild card. When is he coming back? And what are they going to do with it? And, one other thing that we haven't really spoken about is the climate around the Lakers, because some of these young players are wondering, are they going to be passing the ball to LeBron James next week, or are they going to be passing it to Etuan Moore? And for a young player to have to deal with that, whether or not they're going to be included in trade talks, whether or not they're going to last the season in LA, I think that's sort of like a mental, I'm not going to use the word torture, but I think it's kind of hitting some of these guys mentally as well. They can't ignore the scenario. They can't ignore the possibilities, right? And does that affect their play?
I've been curious about the one underlying relationship that is always kind of in the crosshairs when LeBron shows up, and that's the one with Luke Walton. in that dynamic in terms of there's always this sense that the coach has to get on board with LeBron's vision of how things are going to run and what LeBron wants and how he wants it. Luke Walton has done a really nice job of kind of stiff-arming that conversation, but somebody's going to be on the hook for this thing if it doesn't go the way the Lakers planned it. Is Luke Walton, fair or not, going to end up being the guy who takes the brunt of this if the Lakers stumble and don't make the playoffs?
Well, I like how you phrase it, fair or not, because I think the or not part would probably be a bigger in play here than the fair. Now, just think for a second everything that Luke Walton has had to deal with. Number one, you're bringing in LeBron James. Okay, then that's a big thing in and of itself. And then you're bringing in a roster of like 3 or 4 veterans on 1-year deal. Now, a veteran on a 1-year deal, yeah, these guys have all made their money and everything, but they want to stick around in the NBA. So now you've got to factor in them, their playing time, their egos, and taken individually, these guys are interesting to say the least. Okay. Now you've got young players you're still trying to develop. Lonzo Ball spent much of the summer trying to fix his jump shot. I think it's still kind of broken. Brandon Ingram, you're trying to groom him into being a strong number 2 option because you've got to make a money decision on him next summer. He is extension eligible. What are you going to do with him? So you got to kind of know what you have in Brandon Ingram before the season ends. And finally, you have the expectations, probably inflated, management. Magic Johnson, who's a winner. Magic is about the reason why Magic has this job, why Jeannie Buss gave him the job, why Magic talked himself into the job is because of winning. So, you have all those forces, combined together in front of Luke Walton, who, by the way, in terms of temperament, is about as good a coach as you're going to get. He is, I'm not going to say he's laid back from the standpoint he's not demanding, but he's not confrontational. He's got kind of a cool personality. You would think that he could relate to a superstar. He's been around them. He had Shaq and Kobe when he played for the Lakers. When he was in Golden State, he had Steph and KD. So he can relate to the superstars and, of course, who his father was. But he can also relate to the players at the end of the bench who need to be developed. He was one of them. So ideally, he would probably be the right coach. But I think there's a lot of forces going on here that if it doesn't work out, and someone's looking for a scapegoat, then it's probably going to be Luke Walton.
What's the alternative?
Well, first of all, I always thought when people bring up LeBron James and coaching, I really don't think LeBron James cares all that much about who's coaching. It's LeBron James. Ultimately, you can bring in anybody to coach the team that LeBron James is on, and LeBron is pretty much going to do what LeBron does. So I don't think LeBron is, he's got a Luke Walton doll. He's pushing pins in or anything like that. I really don't think LeBron cares that much. I don't think he really cared about Eric Spoelstra. I mean, he liked, Ty Lue personally and probably respected his basketball acumen. But again, I just think it's one of those things where when you become a LeBron James, and maybe 2 or 3 other players might be in that category, you don't care who the coach is. Now, management may care. There might be some players who aren't getting playing time may care. And just in terms of how it looks, you might just want to just put a name out there so it just might look well. But I don't know. Anyway, to answer your question, that was a long-winded introduction there. I would probably say the most logical person would be Ty Lue. He's sitting there. He's unemployed. He'd be the easiest to get. And you would also think that there is less risk with him. He used to play for the Lakers. He knows the culture. He used to coach LeBron James. And, again, he's available and he's won a championship. So that would be the most logical answer. Whether there's someone else in there or some other scenario, that really hasn't presented itself.
Shaun, you've lived and worked in New York and been around those franchises, during seminal moments, in some of the New York franchises' history. And you bring up the culture. And I don't know that people who've never been out there or experienced it understand the culture of Lakers basketball and just how intense the scrutiny is, how the conversation, even in a place like LA where there are a million other things going on, how daily the conversation tends to veer towards the Lakers. What is the reaction and comprehension of the Lakers fan base and folks in LA about what's going on with this team right now? It doesn't seem to be the hand-wringing that was going on in the aftermath of Kobe Bryant's career when they were trying to figure out where do we go next, because now you have LeBron. So you know the direction points towards positive things or good things. But how are they reacting to this season, this year, this group of players, the up and down nature of what they've done? They're 6-11 since LeBron got injured on Christmas. This has to turn Lakers Nation into a stark raving group of fans who are frightened at what could go wrong next.
You know, it's interesting. The Rams are in the Super Bowl and got an exciting team, had a fairly good chance of, becoming Super Bowl champions, playing Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, Patriots in the Super Bowl, big game. And yet, you know what is the driving topic of conversation here? Anthony Davis possibly coming to the Lakers. Right. Possibly. He ain't here, not here. Possibly coming to the Lakers before the trade deadline. Not this summer. Possibly. Big story on the LA Times. Pushed the Rams Super Bowl preparation to the bottom on the back by the tire ads, things like that. So there is still a sense of enthusiasm. There's still a very positive vibe here. There's still the sense that eventually the Lakers will be where everyone expects them to be. But I would say the trade deadline is going to be a checkpoint, because if Anthony Davis is still in New Orleans at the trade deadline and the Lakers are still right around that 8, 9, 10, sitting on the fence spot in the West, and the Rams by then are out of the Super Bowl. So the Lakers got it all to themselves. Then I think there might be I'm not going to say panic, but a sense of worry. I do know that when you combine Magic Johnson, who may be the greatest Laker ever, if not the most popular, with LeBron James, I do think here in LA, which traditionally is a laid back, arrive at second quarter kind of town, I do believe that they want something fairly soon, right away. They're not going to be unrealistic. They know Kevin Durant is still with the Warriors and DeMarcus Cousins, so probably nothing's going to happen this year. But they really want to see the pieces in place for next season. They want to make sure that this team is targeting 2020 as when they're going to win that championship. And if they don't start to see those pieces, then I think that there's probably going to be, a feedback that it's not going to be as positive as it was when training camp began.
Shaun, how much of this is driven by the miss on Paul George? You talked about Plan A and the fact that they didn't go out and trade for Paul George and put themselves in a position to lock him down. They just assumed that the lure of coming home and that Laker culture that Paul George grew up in would be strong enough to pull him in free agency. How much of the Lakers maybe wanting to get this business handled now stems from them not getting the business done where Paul George was concerned?
Yeah, and that's when, we go back to where Magic Johnson's feeling a little bit of pressure this time. The Paul George going back to Oklahoma City, it surprised everybody. I'm sure it surprised you. It probably surprised Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yes.
Because all signs pointed to Paul George before he even got to Oklahoma City, when he was still in Indiana, that he somehow, some way would end up with the Lakers. So that was a swing and a miss. And as I said, I think the Lakers had a plan B, had a plan C, because you've got this succession of players hitting the market. You got Kawhi Leonard, you've got Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, probably going to be available soon, if not a little bit later. So you have, all these, okay, who's next? Who's on deck type of scenarios. But if they whiff on another, then it becomes, again, LeBron James is on the clock. You got to get somebody in here pretty soon. He's only under contract for 3 more years, and now all of a sudden his body is, I wouldn't say it's in danger, but it's at least in question now. So the urgency is a little bit, more heightened now. So you missed on Paul George. It's almost like you got to nail this next one. Now, here's the other issue here, guys. Suppose the Lakers are so desperate to get Anthony Davis that they give up the store. And suddenly you got LeBron, okay, you got Anthony Davis, but all your young core is pretty much depleted. Then what? Then you have to win now, because you don't have anyone in place to take the mantle once LeBron James leaves. Now, you may say that that's not such a big deal. You just want to get at least one championship out of LeBron James and nothing else matters. Okay, fine. I get that. But when Magic Johnson formed this team, he says, you know what? We're just not going to be a team that's going to hit once. We want some sustainability. But you're throwing that all out of the window if you give up all of your young assets to get Anthony Davis. Oh, and by the way, Anthony Davis, I know this season he's played a lot of minutes and really hasn't missed any games, but he does have a history of injury too. And finally, you're also raising the scenario where suddenly LeBron James, if his body doesn't fail him, he's going to get old. And now all you have is Anthony Davis. And you basically have the New Orleans Pelicans in LA.
We're getting ahead of ourselves here. My one thing, I don't root for teams, but one thing I am rooting for is the final playoff spot in the West, either coming between the Lakers and the Clippers or the Lakers and the Kings, where the Lakers are trying to end a 5-year drought and the Kings are trying to end a 12-year drought. But the problem is the only head-to-head between those teams is Lakers Clippers on the last Friday of the season, so you wouldn't get a sort of a climactic final game of the season. But I am still rooting for some sort of playoff battle for the final 8 spot between the Lakers and one of those two rivals.
Yeah, you got to throw the Spurs in that mix too, because they've got a long playoff streak riding.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're in the 6th spot, but they're just a couple of losses away from being right on the fence. So I love that. I love that scenario of the colliding streaks, positive and negative streaks. I like that, John.
Yeah, and LeBron's got his own playoff streak too. Yeah, so that's definitely up there.
It's going to be it's obviously going to be a crazy finish in the West, based on who snags those final playoff spots. But Shaun, last thing on the Lakers before we get to the Schumann stat, which we do every week here on the Hangtime Podcast. If you have to really take a serious look at LeBron, and I know this is blasphemy because he's done this for so long, we've never had this conversation about when does LeBron start showing signs of age and when does father's time start following him around. Have we hit that point with LeBron now that we have to include that in the conversation about his immediate future every time we bring it up, that, his age now is a factor. His years of service is a factor. All the straight trips to the finals have now become a factor because he's had this one injury that's cost him this much time and maybe colors his future differently now going forward.
Sekou, I think we're in a position where we have to be careful about overreacting and underreacting with regards to this injury, because simply it's just mysterious. We don't know whether it's going to lead to other things. Mm-hmm. But, you bring up Father Time. Father Time works in very mysterious ways. Father Time can sap a great player's, talent and strength and legs, and there's like a gradual and sad decline. And then with some other players, Father Time doesn't come knocking on the door until abruptly, and then a player can go from playing extremely well one season, and all of a sudden the next season there's just this drastic drop off. And if you can go look at great players in the past in the NBA, you can even go to other sports, and you can see where Father Time, had different methods against them. I think with LeBron James, it's probably going to be something drastic. Injury. Just, as you said, the type of mileage. This is a guy who's been, how many straight finals, deep in the playoffs, playing 37, 38 minutes, having to carry his team. That takes a toll on anyone's body. I don't care if it's LeBron James' body, anyone's body. Ultimately, you're going to have to pay the price. Ultimately, the bill comes due. And the big mystery with LeBron is, with this injury, is we don't know if suddenly, the waiter's walking up to his table, get ready to hand him the check, saying, LeBron, it's your time. I hope you have your credit card or 2 credit cards because, the bill is due. But we won't know until A, we find out when he comes back from this injury, and B, we see how his body reacts once he does come back.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see him play post-injury. But I will, while we're here, we'll update this stat that I've mentioned multiple times on this podcast over the years. Since he came into the league, LeBron has played 55,527 minutes. Next on the list since the start of the 2003-04 season is Joe Johnson, who has played 44,000 minutes. So he's played more than 11,000 more minutes than any other player in the time that he's been in the league.
Wow.
So it's basically like playing 2.5 extra seasons, essentially.
It's just remarkable.
Or more, basically almost three additional seasons in that time.
Yeah, and it's interesting if you look at Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson and Sekou, you can you can attest to this because you covered him for a little bit, but he had this amazing ascent from Phoenix and all those years in Atlanta where the numbers were going, his scoring average was going up and up every year. And then, right around the Brooklyn era, he had this, Father Time paid him a visit, and it was a sad and steady decline. So again, LeBron is over.
Joe Johnson never really depended on his athleticism all that much.
No, but he was a physical specimen at his.
Oh yeah. He get you on it, on his side, and then he put that butt in between you and the basket, and then he just go and drop in a floater or whatever it was. But yeah. LeBron's
overdue, guys. He's overdue, but again, it's just the basketball gods have blessed him. But yeah, he's overdue. You look at anybody with his kind of wear and tear, they're at least at some point going to have an injury or something.
Yeah.
And he's overdue. But now, again, the question is, how does his body respond? How does he respond?
Yeah. And it's LeBron. He's always, let's be fair. He's always seemed to outplay whatever the expectation is, whatever the limit might be. He breaks through it. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see the remainder of this season when he comes back, and we don't know for sure when that is, and how he performs, how this Lakers team performs. If they don't change anything at the trade deadline, how all of this drama leading up has affected everybody. You're in a great spot, Shaun, by the way, for daily drama in the NBA. You couldn't pick a better place than being in Southern California dealing with the Lakers and by extension, the Clippers, the Warriors up in Northern California, the Kings, in what could be a resurgent season. Very good timing on your part, my friend. Very good timing.
Well, the Lakers are about to go on the road and come east, so you guys are going to get a taste of that. Have at it. Have at it.
Shu, I'm hoping you have a Schumann stat as good as minutes played since LeBron is in the league. That 55,527 is good for at least another day. I'm thinking about using it just because I know I have a buffer, and that it won't change between now and I guess at the earliest Saturday night. So what's your Schumann stat this week?
All right, this is mostly unrelated to LeBron and the Lakers, but actually it touches on them a little bit. So basically, I am looking at the biggest points per game increases from last season. And I'm looking at players that played at least 40 games last season and have played at least 25 games this season. Mm-hmm. It's the players that have seen the biggest increases in points per game from last season to this season. It's there's 7 guys that have scored at least 6 more points per game than they did last season. So we'll go with those 7. And if you have any guesses off the top of your head, go ahead. But we can run down the list, and I'll give you clues, and we can. So do you think, is there anybody on the top of your head that has scored at least 6 more points per game than he did last season?
Siakam,
yes, number 3 on the list. He scored 7.9 more than he did last season, from 7.3 to 15.2. So there you go. He's number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Sekou, any guesses off the top of your head?
I'm trying to think of somebody who's seen a huge jump in their minutes and or production.
All right, so if that's it in minutes, the guy who's seen the biggest jump in minutes, and he's second on the biggest jump in scoring, is the guy that's basically replacing LeBron James in Cleveland.
Rodney Hood?
Nope. Small forward.
Or Cedi Osman.
Cedi Osman, yes. Yeah. He's went from 3.9 points to 12.7 points per game. But he's seen, like I said, he's seen the biggest jump in minutes. He's averaging 21 more minutes per game than he did last season. So he's number 2 on the list. So we have Osman and Siakam. Number 1 on the list is a second-year big man.
Second-year big man.
Second year
on a not very good team. Second-year big man. Local to one of the two of you.
That's a good.
Come on.
Second local, so that have to be the Lakers, Clippers.
Not the Lakers or Clippers.
Yeah.
So somebody here in Atlanta.
Not local to you, Shaun. local to Sekou.
John Collins.
John Collins, correct.
Yeah.
Went from 10.5 last season to 19.3 this season.
I had no idea his scoring average was that high. I knew he was playing well, but I didn't know it was that high.
Fourth on the list is a guy that I would never have guessed. A reserve in the Western Conference, a good team in the Western Conference, a reserve. Actually, I'll just give it to you, a reserve for the Denver Nuggets. Because it's so.
I like when you start giving the answers away like that, Shu. I appreciate it.
Maybe he just barely played last year.
Mm-hmm.
And now is averaging 10.7 points per game for Denver off the bench.
Now, what's weird about that to me is they spread the wealth that well in Denver that they've got a guy.
I said you 10.7 off the bench, or 10, yeah, and you don't know who I'm talking about. He's a young guy. I think he's second year. Pretty sure second year.
Is that Monty Morris?
No. Another guard though, off the Denver bench.
Malik Beasley?
Malik Beasley, yes, yeah. Correct. From 3.2 to 10.7. So he's number 4.
Another guy from Atlanta, by the way. I think he's from Alpharetta, Shaun.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Number 5, Sacramento Kings. Big scoring jump.
Buddy Hield?
Buddy Hield, correct. From 13.5 to 22. De'Aaron Fox is actually 9th on the list. With an increase of 5.9. All right, number 6, New York Knicks guy, just benefiting from playing for the Knicks this year. Starting point guard for the Knicks. Used to play in Denver.
Yeah,
Moutier, correct.
I said Moutier, but I'm saying, yeah. Does a Knick actually qualify on this list, Shu, without an asterisk? Right. And
well,
police tape.
It is what it is. Number 7, jump from 4.8 to 10.8. This is maybe the most fun one. Los Angeles Laker, who has seen a jump from 4.8 points per game last season to 10.8 this season. A new Laker this year.
You say he's a new Laker?
Yep.
Oh, JaVale
McGee, correct. Wow. He's big. I mean, he's 4th on the increase in minutes from 9.5 to 22.1. So we have Collins, Osman, Siakam, Beasley, Buddy Hield, Emmanuel Mudiay, JaVale McGee. The next 3 are James Harden, seeing the 8th biggest increase in points per game from 30.4 to 36.3. De'Aaron Fox, as I mentioned, and another guy maybe benefiting from LeBron's absence, Tristan Thompson. Has basically almost doubled his scoring average from last year.
I had no idea, because JaVale played in the finals and the impact he had at the end of the season. I didn't realize how pedestrian his production was.
It was bigger in
with the Warriors, but
like last year he played 65 games and only 615 minutes, so he played less than 10 minutes per game. Although he played in 65 of the 82, he barely.
Interesting.
I would have thought Karis LeVert, I know he's only played 15, 16 games, but I would have thought he would have been on that, there because he's.
It's a good question. Has he played 20? Did he play 25 games?
No, he hasn't played 25 games this year. No.
Did he? It's a good question. Yeah, it's probably.
But I know he was playing very well for them, and I know his scoring was up. But again, he, limited games.
14 games. Yeah, he's only played 14 games.
He didn't play enough games. Yeah. So. Interesting. He didn't get an opportunity to do what some other guys have done. Which is like you said, Beasley is. Most people probably don't recognize him as who he is, but he's been really good for Denver on a deep Denver roster. Shaun, you mentioned Monty Morris, another young guy in Denver who's had a huge impact. He played really well for them. So interesting stuff.
I'm kind of interested to see how that all works out when Isaiah Thomas comes back, and this is a guy who needs the ball in his hands, and he can score. At least he could before he got hurt, and Denver's going to be a very intriguing team. Mike Malone's done a good job this year, but it's almost like he's got a whole training camp again because he's got guys coming back who will factor into the rotation. And look at some of the injured players. He's had to get back here, and they've had to come in, not mid-season, but during the season. So they're not a complete team.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be like I said, the West is far from settled. And that's why the Lakers, to me, are so intriguing. They could go one of two ways. They could get LeBron back and go berserk and really, change the landscape in the West, or they could continue to slide and maybe LeBron coming back doesn't give them the boost everybody thinks because of all the other teams in the West who are in the midst of similar or like transformations. So, it's hard to know how this thing swings, but it's going to be fun as always to watch. So, Shaun, we appreciate you taking the time, man, getting up early out there in L.A. Tell all our California friends we said hello. We'll see you at All-Star in Charlotte and of course, down the road, watch you on NBA TV and read you on NBA.com as always.
Hey, anytime, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, Shaun.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Shaun Powell right there, folks, from NBA.com. He is our new West Coast bureau chief, holding it down out there in L.A. We talked the last couple of weeks here on the Hang Time Podcast about the perfect player on NBA TV. And before we get out of here, it's time for another edition. And last week, LeBron James won for most athletic player in the NBA. Kyrie Irving has already won for best handles. And we have 6 more categories to go. This week, to me, the one no-brainer category, if there ever was one, the best jump shot. And we got Steph Curry, J.J. Redick, and Klay Thompson as our 3 candidates. You can't go wrong with a splash brother in this category. You can cast your vote on NBA TV's Twitter account until noon Eastern on Friday. Where are you going? Don't start anything crazy. Where are you going with this?
It should be fairly simple, but I'll just compare Curry and Thompson. They're different, right? Like they're different kinds of shooters.
Yes.
In the same way that we talked about last week, how there's sort of different kinds of athleticism, and even the week before, different kinds of handles. In that Curry is the ultimate or the more dangerous offensive weapon just because of how well he shoots off the dribble and how much pressure that puts on your defense.
Mm-hmm.
But Curry, Thompson just like catch and shoot. It's just so quick and so simple. Like his form is just so great, so perfect. But really, so like I said, they're 2 different kinds of shooters. But we got to just go with Curry because he's a great catch and shoot guy as well.
Well, in the range, I think.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Sets him apart from even from Klay, which is very difficult to do. I think they both have shown us that they're on a level of they're all their own, basically, in today's NBA. And some people will tell you in the history of the league, we've never seen 2 guys this good at that craft. At the fact that they play on the same team and have spent their entire careers together is just a touch of greatness from the basketball gods that these guys are able to operate together. It's funny. I think they could have even chopped this into 2 categories. You could say best jump shooter and then best catch and shooter. And then we could have got both of them on there. We could have got Steph on there as the best shooter and then Klay on there as the best.
And I will give J.J. Redick this. The one thing that he can do probably better than both of those guys is come off of a dead sprint and stop and catch and give that ball a decent chance of going in the basket. And we talked about it previously. The most impressive plays of this season still remains that 4-point play that he hit against Detroit right before Blake Griffin got his game winner. This was all the way back in like the 2nd or 3rd week of the season. But he hit just a ridiculous coming off a dead sprint, taking a handoff, stopping on a dime, taking contact, and hitting like a 26-footer for a 4-point play that gave the Sixers a lead right before Griffin got his game winner. And it was just amazing. And it just made me realize how good he is to be able,
how skilled he is,
to be able to do the stop on a dime off of a dead sprint, because we really don't see that with Curry and Thompson. They move really well, but they don't move as fast as Reddick does when he's, going off of pin downs and circling from one side of the floor to the other and trying to get a shot off. That's the one, so I'll give him credit for his ability to shoot, having off of a dead sprint, basically.
Yeah. Well, we've officially reorganized the competition in the contest now. It's the best jump shooter, Steph Curry, the best catch and shooter, Klay Thompson, and we'll just keep it rolling there. You can vote on NBA TV's Twitter account until noon on Friday, and then over the weekend you'll see the results and the discussion on Game Time throughout the course of the NBA weekend on NBA TV. We'll be back Monday, obviously, with another episode here at the Hang Time Podcast. The key race to the MVP ladder drops, as always, on Fridays on NBA.com. I would beg to guess that James Harden might be, after the month that he put together in January, it would be hard to budge him out of the top spot shoe. I'm going to also tell you that I think there's going to be some movement underneath James Harden.
Hey, Giannis Antetokounmpo has a big high-profile game Thursday night. Tonight that could help him, a little head-to-head with Kawhi Leonard could help him help his status. By the way, I'll have a Raptors story previewing that game. Look at the Raptors numbers, sort of their look into their lineups and how they have a sort of a different starters bench dynamic than they've had in the past. That's out Thursday. You can check it out.
Good. Sounds good. Be sure to subscribe to Hang Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes all season long. Make sure you leave a review for John Schumann, for our man Shaun Powell out on the West Coast, Sekou Smith, John Hartzell, our producer. We appreciate you, and we'll see you right here next time on the Hang Time Podcast.